On the edge of a sleepy seaside town where seagulls sang lullabies and the waves whispered secrets to the sand, there lived a little girl named Mira who spoke in stories. At 7 years old, she didn't just like books, she lived inside them. Her room was a jungle of stacked paperbacks, fairy tale posters, and hand-drawn maps to imaginary kingdoms. Every night, she'd climb into bed with a flashlight, reading about brave princesses who outsmarted giants, clever foxes who tricked kings, and children who sailed paper boats across oceans made of dreams. But during the day, Mira was quiet, so quiet that some kids at school forgot she was even there. "She's always got her nose in a book," they'd say, not knowing that inside her heart, Mira was riding dragons, solving riddles with talking owls, and dancing with stars. One stormy evening, as thunder rolled like a giant's drum and rain tapped on her window like impatient fingers, Mira heard a sound that didn't belong, the soft chime of a bell floating on the wind. She followed it barefoot to the old lighthouse at the end of the pier, long abandoned and wrapped in ivy. The door creaked open on its own, revealing not dust and cobwebs, but a spiraling staircase lit by glowing fireflies shaped like letters. Each step hummed beneath her feet, whispering words she could almost understand. At the top, instead of a lantern room, stood the most magnificent library she'd ever seen. Shelves stretched into the clouds, books fluttered like birds between aisles, and constellations swirled across the ceiling like ink spilled on velvet. In the center sat an ancient tortoise with spectacles perched on his nose, reading a book that floated in midair. "Ah," he said without looking up. "You're late. The Moonlight Library only opens for children who believe stories are real." "You're a talking tortoise?" Mira whispered. "And you're a child with a story in your eyes," he replied. "I'm Professor Quill, keeper of lost tales, and tonight, we need your help." He explained that every story ever forgotten by children who grew too old, too busy, or too tired to listen ended up here, fading slowly into silence. But one story was vanishing faster than the rest. The tale of the laughing wind, a joyful adventure that taught children how to turn fear into fun. Without it, more kids would stop laughing at silly things, stop pretending, stop dreaming. "Only a child who still feels the magic can save it," said Quill. Mira's heart pounded. "Me?" "Yes," he said. "You carry stories in your soul. Now you must become one." With a wave of his claw, a glowing compass appeared in her hands, pointing not north but toward wonder. And so, Mira stepped into the story itself. Suddenly standing in a meadow where flowers sneezed when tickled and rivers flowed with lemonade. She met a nervous cloud named Puff, who was afraid to rain because he didn't want to make anyone sad. A clock who'd stopped ticking because no one played hide and seek anymore. And a group of storybook characters. Red Riding Hood with a backpack full of courage, Pinocchio, who now told only truths, and a tiny knight named Pip who was brave even though he was only 3 inches tall. Together they followed the trail of fading laughter to the valley of almost forgotten, where the grumblethorn bushes grew, twisted plants that fed on boredom and whispered, "You're too old for this." There, trapped in a cage of tangled words, was the laughing wind, reduced to a faint breeze that hiccuped instead of howled. "Only a true act of joyful courage can break the spell," said Pip, holding up a tiny sword made of rhymes. Mira looked around at her new friends, then closed her eyes and remembered all the times she'd read aloud to her baby brother, making voices so silly he'd spit his milk out laughing. She remembered the time she dressed as a pirate and told a made-up story to her stuffed animals and how happy it made her. She wasn't just a reader, she was a maker of magic. Stepping forward, she didn't shout or fight. Instead, she began to tell a story, her own story about a quiet girl who found a library in the sky and saved laughter with nothing but her voice. She used funny voices, danced as she spoke, and even sang a nonsense song about a kangaroo who played the tuba. One by one, the others joined. puff rained confetti. Pinocchio clapped with wooden hands, and even the Grumblethorns shook with giggles. The cage cracked, then burst open, and the laughing wind exploded into the sky, swirling around the valley, tickling the clouds, and turning the bushes into blooming daisies. Color flooded back into the world. The Moonlight Library shimmered brighter than ever. When Mira returned, Professor Quill smiled. "You didn't just save a story, Mira. You reminded the world that every child is a storyteller." As she walked home, the first light of dawn painted the sky, and in her pocket she found a single feather, ink-stained and glowing, proof that magic was real. The next day at school, during quiet reading time, a little boy dropped his book and started to cry. Without thinking, Mira picked it up and said, "Want me to read it like a pirate?" And soon, the whole class was laughing, imagining treasure maps and crocodile teachers. From that day on, Mira still loved her books, but she also loved sharing them, because she learned that stories aren't meant to be kept quiet. They're meant to be lived, told, and passed on like starlight from one heart to the next. And every full moon, if you stand quietly by the lighthouse, you might just hear the soft chime of a bell, and know that somewhere, a new adventure is being written, waiting for a child brave enough to believe.